Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ditch the Store. I was mucking around with my microphone. It just dropped down all of a sudden. Just last thing I need. Episode 173 this week. The secret to growing more food without buying more fertiliser. Kind of sounds counterproductive, but wait till you hear me out before you jump in and go, no, that won't work. So, if I were to ask you what is the most expensive thing in your veggie garden, most people would probably say fertiliser or seedlings or water or something like that. And it's actually poor soil, because poor soil will cost you every single season. And poor soil needs more fertiliser, it needs more water, it produces weaker plants, it usually attracts more pests and diseases, and there's reasons for that. So then you kind of start second guessing yourself and wondering why your garden is failing, but it's because you've got poor soil. And if you had better soil, you wouldn't have to spend as much on getting plants growing, because your soil would be doing that for you. So it isn't really about fertiliser as such. It's more about building a garden that needs less of things that you need to buy, which is, what we're trying to do here is buy less at the store. Before we get into all the details though, quick farm update. We have taken receipt of our brand new buckling. Now this episode will be going live on the 30th of, looking at my calendar, 30th of July. So he will have been with us for a week by then, just over a week. And so far what I can say is he makes a lot of noise. Like all babies, he's still settling in. He screams a lot. But he's drinking well, he's eating well, he's in the paddock, in our little kidding paddock with his best friend, who will be his best friend, Doogie, who is the bottle-reared orphan that I had this year, late last year. He is going to be the new Bucks paddock buddy. And I haven't told anybody the name yet, so you guys are kind of hearing it. You'll hear it around the same time it gets released on social media. But his paddock name and his show name is Loki, as in the god of mischief. So hopefully he doesn't live up to that name too well. But he will be a registered Anglo Nubian buck. And hopefully, with any luck, he will be taking him to some shows, which will be the first time for me showing goats. I've shown horses when I was a teenager, but haven't really shown anything else since then. We did used to put in our eggs into a couple of the local shows for egg prizes, and we used to win fairly often. You'll see on a couple of my social media sites I have pictures of the eggs with their award-winning champion egg ribbons. But this will be the first time for a goat show. So we'll see how we go. So make sure if you are interested in seeing baby goats and seeing how the buckling grows, he's 6 weeks old now, and he is only a little bit smaller than Doogie, who is like 9 to 10 months old. But Doogie was also a runt, and he was only about a kilo born, whereas Loki was very much bigger born. He was a singleton buckling out of a really, really good dam and sire. So, yeah, he had the size right from the get-go. But he's certainly going to be a big boy. But follow along on social media if you're interested in seeing videos of him, because I will be posting fairly regular videos and pictures of him. So follow at Mojo Homestead and you'll see all those kind of pictures. Now, winter's also coming to an end here. Which means that we are starting to crack into things. Days are getting a little bit longer, only by a fraction, but we've noticed it. It is still freezing cold. MJ's home from school today, and we just were outside, and the wind is obviously blowing off polar ice caps somewhere to get to us, because the wind is freezing outside. But the sun is out, and the days are starting to get longer in light, which is awesome. Spring is my favourite time of year, so going into that is going to be much nicer. So we're looking at our compost at the moment. Handy Hopper and I, over the next couple of days, will be working on some fencing because we have to get fencing sorted out for the new buckling paddock. You have to start looking at your irrigation that you need to check. You need to start looking at tools that you're going to use in the garden through spring and make sure that they're all up to scratch. And then it'll be time to crack in and get garden beds ready. And that leads into what we're talking about today. Most people think that their gardens really start in spring when they start, digging the compost in and getting seedlings planted, stuff like that. But they don't. They actually start now in the pre-preparation stage. And the thing that I wanted to talk about today is basically around the fertiliser trap. And I've heard farmers kind of link it to this. They call it a fertiliser trap, and I'll explain why in a sec. But I think most people who are into gardening, and, I always joke and say I have to work very hard at gardening. It doesn't come naturally to me. Caring for animals comes very naturally to me, but working gardens is something I really have to put the effort in. But quite often you'll look at things that you're growing in your garden, you think, oh, the plants aren't looking good. Maybe it needs a bit of fertiliser, a bit of sea salt, something like that on it. Lettuce is not growing. I probably need to put some more nourishment into the soil. Pumpkins, potatoes, not really pepping up the way you thought they would. And so the automatic turn of mind is to go to fertiliser. But when you walk into the garden centres and there is a product for every problem, bigger crops, greener leaves, more flowers, more fruit, it's actually just brilliant marketing. And it's pretty sad that we live in such a society that marketing really does sell it all, and people don't think, what's causing the problem and can I fix the cause, the root cause of the problem, rather than go with whatever marketing ploy is telling me to buy to fix it after the fact. It really does just teach us to treat the symptom instead of asking what's causing that problem. So I have a farmer friend who actually, his daughter was playing footy with my daughter, and we were talking about it one day, and he was telling me about the fertiliser treadmill. That's what he refers to it as. And he said the system wasn't working anymore, but he couldn't get off it. I didn't make the connection, but he said he literally has to keep buying fertiliser and can't stop buying fertiliser, because if he stops buying fertiliser, then everything falls apart. And all he wants to do is grow really good crops for his livestock. And without the fertiliser, it just doesn't happen. But he knows that if he stops putting the fertiliser in, he's going to go backwards for a couple of years before he goes forwards again, because he's been using it for so long. And I think a lot of us do this. I think it's not just in the garden, but in life. We tend to become really good at buying solutions instead of building systems that work. And there's a woman that I follow online, Tina Tower. I always think Tina Turner. Tina Tower, she's a business coach. And she talks about systems all the time, and about how once you get really good systems in place, that's when everything starts to work. And I think it's pretty much the same with gardening. If you feed the soil, not the plant, that's probably a really good system to get into. And it's a big mindset shift for people who, like me, aren't natural gardeners. For years, I would have thought, I've just got to feed the plants. I've got to give fertiliser to the plants to make them grow. And then the more I learn about soil, and there's a couple of really good books out there. I'll try and put links in show notes. But books like Holistic Management, and there's a book, I can't remember whether it's called Soil or Dirt, but it's by a Canadian farmer, and Canadian or North American farmer, and he's amazing with soil stuff. And I think that's when we have that mindset shift where we realise that we were feeding the wrong thing. We don't need to feed the tomatoes. They aren't the ones eating the compost. They aren't the ones eating the fertiliser. It's your soil that needs the compost and the fertiliser. And you don't get to that point really until you understand a little bit about soil. So it's underneath that soil is a whole community of living things. You've got earthworms, you've got fungi, you've got microbes, you've got insects, millions of tiny things doing their job that we never see. But when they're all doing their job, that's when you will grow amazing tomatoes. Our job isn't really to look after the plant that's in the ground. Our job is to look after the soil and let the soil look after and nourish the plant. So healthy soil, what makes the difference. Healthy soil holds water better for longer. Like, you don't have to water as often. And if you go through a dry patch, healthy soil will retain moisture. It drains better. So it holds moisture, but it doesn't hang on to it. It allows it to drain when there's an oversupply of water. It doesn't want to hang on to every last bit of it. It'll grow stronger roots on your plants. So you'll find that plants are solider and have a better lifespan because they're able to attach to the soil better. It buffers temperature changes. And this is a really important one if you're like me and live in an area where, gardening is limited to a certain window of time because we have really, really cold winters where a lot of plants just won't grow. It also buffers temperature changes as far as the heat too. So when it gets really, really hot, the soil will keep at a more constant temperature and not fluctuate to that really hot heat. It feeds plants naturally. Good soil there's enough organic matter in there to make the soils have enough nutrients to do their job and grow and develop fruit, seeds, leaves, flowers, whatever it is they're growing. And the longer you keep the good soil going, the easier it gets to work with every year. So the more you look after that soil, the better your garden will be long term. And that's a much better investment than going and buying another bag of fertiliser from Bunnings because you can't get soil health to a point where it's actually growing plants for you. Now, something to keep in mind if you think, no, everything needs fertiliser, something I want you to think about is nature doesn't buy fertiliser. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but think about it. When was the last time you saw somebody fertilising a forest or a rewilded area that had trees and plants and things like that in it? Never. It doesn't happen because forests have a system that works for them, and that's nature. They grow some of the healthiest plants you'll ever see. There's no liquid fertiliser. There's no miracle powders. There's no special tomato tonic. Nature has been growing healthy plants for millions of years without any of that kind of additive. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And it's because nothing goes to waste. I just briefly, a little story about, we had a Jim's mowing franchise for a while, me and the handy helper. And I used to always laugh when he would come home and say that he had a mulching mower. So it was a mower that used to mulch the grass up as it mowed. So it would cut the grass into really fine little bits and it would drop the grass instead of collecting it in a bag at the back of the mower. The mulching mower would cut it all up really fine and then it would allow that level of cut up fine grass to drop down so that it would essentially go between the grass that he was mowing and land on top of the soil underneath that grass. And there were so many customers who didn't want him to do the mulching mower thing. They wanted him to collect the grass and, throw it out because they didn't want that grass being regurgitated back into their lawn because it didn't look good and it didn't look pretty and all the rest of it. And he used to do my head in because when in nature, in a forested area, do you see somebody going out there and raking up leaves, cutting grass and taking the grass clippings away, that kind of thing? It just doesn't happen. In those rewilded areas where they do their absolute best, there's a couple of things that happen. Leaves fall off trees during the winter months. Now, not all trees are deciduous. Some trees are evergreen and they'll keep their leaves all year. But the deciduous ones will drop their leaves through the winter period to allow the tree to have a bit of a buffer. It's a bit like the molting season with chickens. And when that happens, nobody comes in and rakes up the leaves. The leaves fall on the ground and they rot on the ground. Branches that fall out of trees, and if you live in Australia, eucalyptuses are sometimes referred to as widow makers because they drop branches at a rate of knots. Like, they really do shed their leaves. They shed their branches as well. So the branches drop and they rot on the ground as well. Animals that come through, and that could be ruminant animals, which, in the books Holistic Management that Alan Savory writes about, he talks about ruminant animals coming in and stomping their manure and their urine into the ground in certain areas. And that's why regenerative agriculture works so well, because it's adding things to the soil. Out in nature, animals come and shit everywhere and nobody's running around picking up animal shit, are they? they pee and they shit, and it all goes into the ground. Plants die, and when they die, the dead plant will rot and go back into the soil. Everything feeds something else. And that's what we're trying to copy in our gardens, not commercial agriculture where you're plonking a shit tin of fertiliser and then a shit tin of pesticide, and then you're digging the ground up and making it barren so that you can put more fertiliser in to grow things with. That is not effective, and it's not regenerative agriculture, but it's also not great for the soil. And like I said earlier, a farmer that I know, he spoke about it and he said, I wish I could get off the treadmill. I really wish I could, but I can't because it'll take me too long to get back to where I'm meant to be. There's another branch of agriculture that discusses it in detail that I'm not super familiar with. And it's a little bit woo-woo, but I'll try and put something in the show notes for that too if it doesn't come to me. But manure from animals, rotting plant matter, all those kinds of things pushed into the soil. And not all manures work great in a raw kind of setting. We'll talk about chicken poo shortly. But certainly any kind of rotting vegetation matter or animal manure going into the soil is going to make it better. It will lead to a natural compost, and that's how nothing ever goes to waste. It just becomes future soil, which is the best way. Now, there are 5 ways that I've come up with that help you buy less fertiliser in the long run. And please keep in mind, I'm not saying don't ever buy fertiliser. There are times when fertiliser is going to be beneficial. I've got 2 indoor plants that I don't want to put a huge amount of compost on the indoor plants inside the house. So with them, I would probably just use a little bit of sea salt in a water bottle and do it that way because it's just easier and less smell in the house. But in my veggie garden, I wouldn't be doing that unless I had no other choice, unless the soil really didn't look healthy to me. So the 5 things that I've come up with that I like the idea of using are, number 1, compost. Compost is where everything starts. I think that's probably the most important thing. Kitchen scraps, autumn leaves that you've raked up, out of the garden if you do that. Garden prunings, animal bedding is a great one, sawdust or straw. We don't tend to use straw with the goats because we find that lice attaches to the straw, same with the chickens. So we tend to use sawdust. But any of that kind of animal bedding, particularly if you use the deep fill methods where there's a lot of manure and urine mixed in with the bedding, that is great stuff to put into your compost. And compost, you've got to remember, it's not about feeding your veggies. It's feeding the soil that's under your veggies so that soil can feed your veggies. So don't stress too much about what's going into the compost. I know a lot of people are very anti anything meat going into their compost. We tend to chuck just about everything in. We compost dead chickens. We're not going to bury every chicken that dies when we've got, 40 eyes of browns kind of thing. And we're down to a lot less than 40 at the moment. But when we do have eyes of browns, and probably won't do it again, but when we did do that, when they would keel over, we wouldn't go and dig a hole for them. We'd just chuck them in the compost and cover them with a bit more compost and let them rot and go back into the earth the natural way. The second thing is mulch. And that's what I was talking about before with the lawn mowing and people not wanting the self-mulching, the auto-mulching mower to go over their lawn and not pick up the grass. I don't get it because it's free. It's a free soil helper. Essentially, that's what it does. It's not just there to stop weeds. It does a lot more than that. And this is where people, I think, just confused it. So it keeps moisture in the soil. It protects the soil from harsh weather. So really, really hot days, really, really cold nights. Mulch across the top of soil will help that. It feeds the microbes as it breaks down. So as the mulch, because it's organic matter, as it breaks down, the microbes will use that for their food. And so it also then goes on to improve soil structure over time. Because it is organic matter, you're just adding more. It's like adding more compost. But I always think of mulch as like a blanket for your garden. We have trialled using wool, Angora wool, as a bit of a mulch kind of over some of our soil. It works really well. It certainly keeps the moisture levels in well, and it keeps the temperature perfect. Number 3 is well composted chicken manure. Now, chicken manure is fantastic, but French chicken manure is incredibly strong. And that's part of what makes it so valuable, because it's very high in, I think it's nitrogen that it's really high in. Yeah, nitrogen. I've got it on my little list here. And so nitrogen is an essential for plants. If you look at, I think it's potassium, phosphorus, nitrogen are the three that are essential for plants to grow. And so nitrogen is really, really important, and chook poo is really high in that. The problem is that, and it also, I've got on my little notes here, it also contains good phosphorus and good potassium. That's what it was. What did I say? Yeah, I did say phosphorus. Potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen are the three you need, and it contains all of those. So it's great. And compared with cow, sheep, or horse manure, it's generally a lot more concentrated. So a little bit goes a really long way. But because it is so rich in nitrogen, and because it contains high levels of ammonia, it can burn plant roots and seedlings. So fresh manure is not ideal. And some people say that it also carries some pathogens, which are not recommended if it's going on to edible crops. But the good bit is with chicken manure, you can let it break down over a period of time. And as it dries and breaks down, it becomes more powdery. Then it can be a really good additive to your garden in place of fertiliser. Now, is it the best manure? Well, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Chicken manure is very high in nutrients, great for boosting fertility in the soil. But like I said, needs to be composted first. If it goes on straight and raw, it can be a little bit too much. Cow manure is lower in nutrients, but it's really good for adding organic matter and improving soil. It's much gentler as far as being able to put on sooner, and more forgiving. So if you put too much on, it's not going to go overboard. Sheep manure, a little bit richer than cow manure. And you can actually buy it in a pelleted version of fertiliser, which is kind of weird. I think most of us, if you know somebody or you live near somebody who's got sheep, just go collect some sheep poo from them. And it's probably a good idea to test all these ones out and see which one works best for your soil. That'll be a really good indicator for what your soil needed anyway. Horse manure, which as a horsey girl growing up, we used to bag up our horse manure and sell it or give it away, because sometimes you couldn't sell it, but we'd give it away. It's a good natural source of organic matter, but it sometimes can contain weed seeds, and that's why sometimes people didn't want it. If the horses ate hay with mature weeds in it, then the seeds would pass straight through them, and so their manure would then contain those seeds. So patience matters when it comes to manure. You need to compost it properly first and let it really, really break down, and that'll also show if there's any weeds and things like that in it. Once it's done that, then it can be applied into the soil without a problem. And it's important to remember that in the natural world, manure breaks down over a period of time. And while it may land on the ground straight away, it's not necessarily going to land on a plant in the wild. It's going to land on the soil, and then it'll be absorbed into the soil that way. Now, one that I am still learning about, but I want to include is number 4, green manure crops. And when I say that, most people automatically go, green manure? You just said to break down manure before you do it. Green manure crops are not manure. They're just plants that you're going to dig back into the ground. So they're basically plants that you grow for the soil instead of for yourself, which kind of sounds weird if you're trying to do a veggie garden, but hear me out. Instead of leaving an empty garden bed, you can put something like oats, peas, lupins in there. While they're growing, they protect the soil, they stop weeds from taking over the soil, and they feed the life that's underneath it. Before they go to seeds, you chop them down and leave them on the soil to break down. So they'll do, like we said, with a dead plant out in the forest, they will break down and go back into the soil, adding organic matter. For things like legumes, they will also add, so that's your peas and things, they'll also add a bit of extra nitrogen too. Think of it as growing a crop whose only job is to make the next garden bed's crop better. That's what you're doing. You're feeding the soil. So that's a really good one to think about. If you haven't done it before, like me, I haven't done it before, so this will be a good one for me this year. And then crop rotation, which I have done before, and there is an art to it, and I am not an expert in it. I would suggest going to Pinterest and putting in crop rotation for veggie gardens, and you'll get 1,000,001 pins showing you things to do. But essentially what it is it's about not growing the same thing in the same spot year after year. Now, that doesn't mean you can't grow it in the same spot for 2 years in a row. Oh, excuse me. But the idea is that you rotate your crops through in order to not drain the soil of the particular nutrients that that plant needs every single year, year after year. And this is where farmers get into trouble when they're growing wheat, barley, corn, oats, things like that in a vast, 50, 100-acre paddock. They're planting the same plants continuously on a rotating basis. And if they don't plant a rotating crop in between that plant, the soil could just go to shit. So that's where the farmer that I was talking about, he's constantly having to buy fertiliser because he can't break that cycle of what he's doing. But different plants take different nutrients out of the soil, and they also attract different pests and diseases, which is another thing that helps the soil stay healthy. By moving crops around each season, you would give the soil a bit of a break and you'd make it harder for bugs and disease to kind of get in. And I've got something else written here. What do I have? Oh, yeah. Sorry, it's keeping the soil healthy, but it will also keep your plants healthier because you're not putting a plant back in the soil where it's been depleted of, say, nitrogen, and this might be a really heavy needing nitrogen plant. So by swapping them around like that, you're getting a better opportunity. Anyway, so gardens, I mean, at the end of the day, that soil, all that stuff about soil, not having to buy fertiliser, what you're trying to aim for is a bit of a long-term relationship with your soil. And, when people say, oh, how do we grow better veggies? I actually think we're really asking the wrong question. It probably should be, how do we get better soil? And certainly advocates for that, like Alan Savory. And I think the other guy's name is Gabe Brown. I'll try and put a link in the show notes for his book. And it's something to do with soil health. But guys like that who've studied it and they're farmers, they've been farmers for years, or wildlife conservatory managers for years, in Alan Savory's case, they know that without that good soil health, you're fucked. You can't grow really good plants. So healthy soil gets better year after year. And the more you look after it, the better it will get, to the point where my next door neighbour, he's got a real good system going with his with his livestock rotation on his fields. His soil and plants, I look and I'm so jealous when I look over the fence. Poor soil gets more expensive every year, not less expensive and not better quality. And that's where you've got these farmers that are on that horrible treadmill of having to buy fertiliser, pest control, pesticides to put back into the soil in an effort to just try and keep growing. It's a big difference, and I think it's one that smaller people who are doing just homestead kind of gardens, and particularly if you're growing food for your family, you're not going to want to add those additives to it if you can avoid it. If you can just have really healthy soil that grows great food, then that's obviously a win-win. Now, I think it's really important, and I did say it before, but it's really important to say that it's not about never ever buying anything again. I've just had a conversation online with a lady who said, oh, I think it's really good that you're trying really hard not to buy anything from the supermarket. And I said, let me tell you, I think my kids and the handy helper would all go on strike if I suddenly stopped buying toilet paper. It's not about not buying anything from the store. It's about trying to do what you can with what you have without having to go to the store as a first instance. That being said, there's always things you are going to buy from the store. We are never going to get off that toilet paper treadmill. I can tell you that right now. But can I build a system that's going to prevent me having to buy more and more fertiliser every time to get a really good veggie garden going? And I hope that my soil this year is going to be really top quality and I'm not going to have to put fertiliser on. I've got fertiliser there. I've got sea salt. That's what we use. It's a seaweed-based fertiliser. That's all we use if we're going to use anything. And it's what the handy helper used when he ran the gym's mowing. He always used to do sea salt because it's organic. It doesn't have any artificial things in it. It doesn't have any chemicals in it. But if I can still stay away from it and grow my veggie garden without using it, well, that would be a huge win. Sometimes you have to buy it, sometimes you don't. If you can try and lead into your season without having to buy it, I would say that would definitely be a win. Having healthy soil is one of those things where it will give back to you, and the better the soil gets, the less you'll end up relying on bags, bottles, or miracle products, especially when some of those miracle products aren't so miracle. They say that they're going to do amazing things, but they don't always do those amazing things. Now, I wanted to include a little section in the podcast from here on in where I'd spend my money instead, because it really is important to me to get it out there that this isn't about being tight or cheap. That's certainly not what I'm trying to get at from the ditch the store philosophy. It's more about what is more valuable to me to spend my money on and what is less valuable for me to spend my money on. So, for me, buying supermarket bread, I buy it when I have to, and the kids certainly eat it. I won't eat supermarket bread if I can avoid it because it just makes my gut hurt. So I'll try and get sourdough. But I don't want to spend $8 on a sourdough loaf from the bakery because I know that they're the people that are making the real sourdoughs. So I would rather make my own sourdough knowing that it's only going to cost me about $1.50 and have that and consume that myself rather than having to spend $8 at the bakery. Excuse me. So instead of being tight or cheap, let's talk about being frugal in the sense of what are the things worth spending your money on? Now, because we've been talking about fertiliser and gardening, the things that I'm going to mention in this particular episode are going to be around that. So here's a couple of things that I would spend my money on at the store that you could probably build it yourself, but sometimes it's better to buy it or easier to buy it or more functional to buy it. So a decent compost bin. Now, you absolutely can build it. And at the moment, we have built one where we've got two walls and 2 walls at the side and a back wall. And we dump all of our organic matter into that and turn it over. To be honest, it's overtaking the walls at the moment, and the pile of organic matter sits much higher than the walls are. So we might need to put some bigger walls up. But if I was in a backyard house again, if I was in a backyard setting in a suburban environment, a decent compost bin is amazing if you get a good one. Don't get one that's really thin plastic. They break. The sun bakes them and they end up breaking. So a decent compost bin is something that is worth putting a little bit extra into. A strong wheelbarrow. There is nothing worse than having a shitty wheelbarrow. And I've had some shitty wheelbarrows in my time. I've also had some secondhand ones that the handy helper and I have patched up holes in and crap like that. But having a really good wheelbarrow, and we just recently bought one of those carts that you can tow behind you. That's a 4-wheel drive cart. And we bought it for a kid's sports carnival so that we could carry stuff because I was on crutches still. But we would use that around the farm to cart food, medicines. If we're going up to a different paddock to give animals medicines, it'd be a great way of carting it around. And we didn't spend a fortune on it, but wow, we got a good one. I think we spent about $100, $120, and it turned out to be amazing. It was the best buy ever. A quality garden fork. Again, there is nothing worse than trying to use a tool and having it break or bend and not work properly. So getting a really good garden fork is going to save you so much effort down the track and frustration. Rainwater storage, if it's practical. So if you are not in a suburban area where you can't have a rainwater tank, I would say definitely have a rainwater tank. If you are in an area where you can't have a big tank, you can still collect water off your downpipes using what we used to call them olive drums. They were big plastic, probably 100-litre, maybe 200-litre tubs with a black screw top lid on them kind of thing. You can use them for food storage and stuff like that. But we used to use them and cut a hole in the top and feed the downpipe through into it, and it would collect water, rainwater, because every drop counts. At the end of the day, if you can utilise anything that's landing on your roof and just falling onto the ground, you may as well. Shade cloth. This is another one I won't buy cheap. We've bought cheap before and it's shit. It goes all fibrey. The plastic starts to break down in it, and it goes fibrous and just crumbles essentially in the sun. And I mean, when you think about it, shade cloth is designed to sit out in the sun continuously, and the weather and the rain. And so when it breaks down like that, it's really frustrating. So it's worth spending a little bit extra at Bunnings to get a better quality shade cloth. Fruit trees. I bought cheap. I won't do it again. There's a nursery up in Sydney, I think it's Daly's Nursery, who have probably the best quality fruit trees that I've seen around. The ones at Bunnings, the only issue I have with anything at Bunnings, and I think next week I'm talking about, or the week after, I'm talking about buying seedlings from Bunnings. And you absolutely can buy seedlings from Bunnings. Don't let it stress you out not to. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that you don't know where the plant started its life. So it could have started its life up, north where it's nice and warm and sunny. And instead, you're now in a situation where you're putting it in the ground and it's freezing cold. So fruit trees, worth buying fruit trees where they've been climatised to a similar climate to yours. Permanent garden beds, we do make them, but wow, bought ones sometimes are really good. Now, all of those things, they'll still be helping you in 10 or 20 years' time from now if you buy really good quality ones. So before buying anything for your garden, kind of sit back and ask yourself, will this still be in my garden and useful and functioning in 5 years' time? And if you don't think it's going to be a yes, then probably don't spend your money on it. If it's a yes, have at it. Spend your money. Honestly, it's probably going to be one of those purchases that you look back years later and go, I'm so freaking glad that I bought that. To me, this week, what I'm looking at, so out of all those things, this week, my worth money spending on thing is a good quality garden fork, because the one that we had up in the yard has collapsed. The handle broke and it's shit. And so we need a new one. So I'm probably going to go and look for a really good quality one. And if I have to spend $150 on one, I don't mind doing that if I know that it's going to last me for 10, 15 years. And, things like turning over the compost, spreading manure, loosening soil. We try to do kind of a no-dig method for some things, but obviously you have to loosen the soil sometimes. It can be a bit compacted. Digging potatoes out, having a good garden fork for that is so useful. It's definitely something that I need to get before spring kicks in. Now, another thing I wanted to do this week is this week's store swaps. God, say that really quickly. This week's store swaps. Might need to change that because that doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? So what's one thing that you could buy, that you could grow this week or make this week that you don't have to buy from the supermarket? And this week, I want to say fresh herbs. I have not been growing my own herbs in the last couple of months for a lot of obvious reasons, considering I can't even kind of get down on the ground and get back up again. So buying fresh bunches of parsley. I make my own stock in the Thermomix, but I buy herbs to put in the stock and herbs to put in our cooking, and I haven't been growing them. So this week, I'm going to try and buy at least one plant that is a herb that will survive on my veranda, because it's still too cold to be out in the garden, that can keep growing and keep giving us herbs, fresh herbs. And I'm actually thinking of rosemary. Rosemary's I love rosemary. And we don't eat a lot of lamb here, but rosemary and lamb is great. But if the kids are making chips, hot chips, like as in fries, for those that call them fries, sea salt and rosemary, oh my God, to die for. So they're easy to grow herbs. They don't take up much room. So even if you're in a backyard or in an apartment and you only have a veranda or a windowsill, you can still do it. So if you do it, post a picture of your herb that you've bought or grown and link in Mojo Homestead to it, and I will do the same. I'm going to try and get it tomorrow because I'm working over the weekend, and we'll see how we go. Even if you just use a few sprigs for dinner, or in an oil, you might be infusing oil with a herb or something like that. It'd be great. Now, the last thing I want to do is this week's challenge. So something that you can do each week to try and help you go through this kind of journey of getting things that you're growing yourself. And this week's challenge is a really, really simple one. And I'm going to go and do it myself, and I'll try and video it. I'll try and do it tomorrow. See how I go with looking after a brand new baby goat. Head outside and grab a handful of soil out of where you want to grow your veggies. Have a good look at it. Rub it between your fingers. Have a smell of it and see if it smells like good, fresh soil. Then ask yourself, are you feeding your plants or are you feeding the soil? And if your soil doesn't look up to par and it doesn't look like it's going to do the right thing by your plants this spring, start working on it now. It's end of July here in Australia. It's freezing cold still. Give it 2 months and the sun is going to be shining and we will be wanting to put things in the garden. So go and have a look. That's your challenge to do that this week. And the last thing I have to announce is this amazing new thing. I've been sitting on this for like a week and I'm so excited to announce it. If you would like to, I have developed a quiz that you can go and do, and it's called the Ditch the Store Score. Completely free. I do ask that you sign up to my newsletter to get your results. So if you don't want to sign up to a newsletter, don't go and do it. But if you want to see where you sit as far as whether or not you're ditching the store or whether you're not ditching the store, you can go along. It's at www.ditchthestore, all one word lowercase, .com/DTS score, the word score. So DTS SCORE. The links will be in the show notes. You can go and do the quiz. It takes 3 minutes. It's like 20 questions, and it will give you a percentage of how much you are ditching the store. The idea is that in 6 months' time, when you've put more things into play, you can come back and do the quiz again and see if your score has improved. So have a go at it. Let me know if you get your results. Take a screenshot and post it and say, that's what my score was. That's how well I did. I'll go and do it as well, because believe it or not, even though I talk about ditching the store all the time, there are still things we buy from the supermarket. There is a lot that we still buy from the supermarket, and I am certainly not 100% ditching the store at this point in time. I'm probably a little bit ahead of some people, but I'm not ahead of everybody. So I'm going to go and do the quiz as well, and I will post my results, and you can post your results and see if you beat me. I'd love to see that. Anyway, that is it for this week. Don't buy fertiliser. Just get your soil health under control. And remember that once the soil health is under control, the soil will feed the plants and you won't need to feed them. Now, next week, I'm going to be talking about buying seed saving. So it's all about seed saving next week. And it's something that I'm still learning to do. Like I say, gardening stuff is something that I really have to educate myself on. And I have been doing it for a little while. We've been keeping tomato seeds, cucumber seeds. I used to keep capsicum seeds, but I don't grow capsicums anymore because nobody in the house actually likes them. So it was one of those ones that just fell off the radar because we don't all eat it. And what was the other one? Oh, and I was keeping my garlic cloves to put back in the ground, and my seed potatoes as well to put back in the ground. But seed saving is what we're talking about next week. And I will touch on the things that aren't seeds as such. But otherwise, that is it for this week. Have a great week. Keep an eye on the social media pages so you can see lovely pictures and videos of Loki, the amazing goat, jumping around. He's a bit of a twit still because he's only 6 weeks old. And I will talk to you all next week. Bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us, or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojahomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.